Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Authors on Mission podcast, the podcast committed to delving into top-tier insights and strategies employed by experts in their fields. And today we are joined by Paul Andrew Skidmore, an independent author and filmmaker from Tennessee, whose work exemplifies creative innovation outside traditional systems. Paul has published 3 short stories and a novel, and his short story, The Darkness Rolled Over Her, has been adapted into a feature film set for release this year. It's so exciting. And notably also, Paul has developed 5 coffees and a book, a unique framework that transforms the book club experience into a 5-week deep exploration of stories' themes. So that's a bunch about Paul. We're going to dive into all of his work and the writing process as well on today's episode. And without further ado, Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Always. And we love welcoming on new authors in all different genres and domains. And I'm really excited to, dive into this one because, a lot of the people who come onto this podcast, they're entrepreneurs, business people. Maybe the books are nonfiction, self-help. So I always love these more exciting stories like this, and especially the aspect of that it's going to be a feature film, something really just awe-inspiring. So many authors listening today are hoping that their own book becomes a movie one day. So tons to talk about. I'm rambling on. I'm really excited. So I'm going to give you the floor. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to writing The Darkness Rolled Over Her.
Okay, well, as you said, I'm an author and filmmaker in Tennessee. My background is filmmaking. So I was born in 1978. So by the time I was a kid, I'm watching Back to the Future and Star Wars and Indiana Jones, Superman the movie, Ghostbusters. This is what I grew up on. Goonies, And as Jerry Seinfeld says, these were not stories, these were career paths, as far as I knew as a kid. This was the fantasy world that I thought maybe I could live in, the adventures that I could be a part of one day. And as I got older, I realized that, of course, those worlds don't exist. They're all fictional, but the movies exist, and being able to make movies like that is something that human beings do. And so why not me? And so I did a little bit of college. I did music education for a couple of years before I went to film school. I went to Carolina School of the Arts in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And there I just met a lot of people who were like me, that loved stories, that loved movies, loved making them, and just built some lifelong friendships with people who are really passionate about this very specific endeavor. And since then, I've been working. I decided not to go to Hollywood like a lot of my friends. I decided to stay here. I wanted to do my own thing. And so that's meant a lot of freelance work and just sort of video production work and things around here, get the bills paid. And in the meantime, working on my creative stuff, trying to work to this point where I'm at now, where, I've got this feature film that is imminent, and we've got some visual effects left to finish, and we've got some music left to be done. But hopefully the film will be done very soon, and I can get it out to everyone. But The Darkness Rolled Over Her came about because in 2018, I decided that I would write some short stories. I had been kind of working on a novel idea. It was something that was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I was thinking about it and I couldn't stop thinking about it. Got up, went to Waffle House, and hammered out 3,500 words. The next night went back, chapter 2, wasn't even really sure what I was writing. I just had to get it out, And as I got into it, I thought, hey, I kind of like this thing that I'm making. I can see that it's going to be a longer thing. I'm a movie guy. I'm a TV guy. I don't read a lot of fiction books. I do a lot of reading, but I don't sit down and read a book cover to cover very often. I enjoy it. I just don't do it. So I thought, I don't really know this world that I'm getting into. I don't know how to market this. And I care about this. So let me write something short that maybe I don't care about as much. And just get it done, get it out there, and figure out what's the mechanism here. How do I get it on Apple Books? How do I get it on Amazon? Can I do a paperback? Do I just have to do an ebook? How do I sell it? How do I do Facebook ads and those kinds of things? I just kind of wanted to see if I do all this myself, what's that going to be like? So in May, I think of 2018, I wrote Kindling. I published Kindling. Nobody knew that I was doing it. it's a story that I'd had in my mind for about 10 years. So it only took me about 2 weeks to kind of bang it out. I had a friend who's an editor, and she said, "Hey, it's real short. If you want to come over one night, we'll fix dinner. We'll go over the book." And so I got it published from there, just published it myself. Once it was up, I told everybody, "Hey, I got a book," and had a really good response to it. And people really wanted a paperback. It was a 36-page short story. It didn't make a lot of sense to do a paperback at that time. So I thought, well, I'll do several short stories and put them all together like an anthology, and I can just release a bunch of stories at once. And so the three stories that followed in 2019, The Darkness Rolled Over Her, Ciao Bella, and what eventually became a novel, which is God Rest You Merry Gentlemen, those were all stories I was going to put, in this anthology. So The Darkness Rolled Over Her was one of those stories. It began, my dad's a fly fisherman, and he helped out some friends on a fly fishing trip one weekend and came back and told us about it. His whole story was like 2 minutes. There's not a lot of details. He had a fun time. And I just kept kind of thinking about that and thought, maybe I can make a story out of this. Because the stories that I was looking for to kind of fill out this anthology, I was thinking like, what are some kind of a parable, type stories. The stuff that I read a lot of, sort of essay, article, nonfiction kind of things. But I just find that things that are written in a narrative style, whether they're true or not, whether they're fiction or true, if they're written in a narrative style, they create something that's not on the page.
Mm.
That's something that facts can't quite get to. There's something about fiction that is more true than a list of facts. And so I wanted to dive into sort of this allegorical, sort of parable type world. And, my dad is a fly fisherman. He's tried to teach me how to fly fish. I'm not as good at it as he is. He's been doing it 60, 70 years. But in the fishing that I'd done before, is mainly sitting on the side of the shore and just putting a worm or some corn out in the water and waiting for hours on end. But fly fishing is different. You're out in the water. You're standing in the water. You're walking upstream. You're walking over the big slippery rocks. You're going, in the East Tennessee mountains where my dad fly fishes, you're going uphill. And so he'll get down in the river and he may not get out of the river for 2 or 3 hours. And he's walked, 2 or 3 miles by the time he's done fishing. And I thought about how when we would do that, you have to keep moving. And so that became sort of the ostinato of this story, this idea of, you got to keep moving. And so I decided, well, I need a character then who has decided to stop moving and who's decided to give up. And soon the story became about a woman who's decided to take her own life, who decided to fully give up. Once it became about that, I realized this wasn't just sort of a fun little entertaining parable that I was writing, but that there was something important here. And it sort of took on a life of its own. And I had some very gracious friends in my network that had experience firsthand in some way with that topic. And I reached out to them and asked if they would read some early drafts, and they were very gracious in reading early drafts and giving me some feedback, which I tried to incorporate into the story. I had a friend who lost her father. I had two friends that had attempted and lived, thank God, and they were very willing to share their personal stories with me about that. I had another friend that was a counselor and had counseled many people through times like that, and she was able to give me a lot of advice, from sort of the other side of it. And so I tried to work that in, not just in the way you see Gwen thinking about everything that's going on around her, Gwen being the main character of the book, but also in the characters of, say, Roy or Mrs. Hiddlemeyer, who are other characters in the book. I wanted them to model appropriate ways to respond to someone who is dealing with this kind of darkness and struggling in this way. So I wanted the book to be something that people could hold up and say, hey, this is how I feel, or that they could read and go, oh, I think this is how my friend feels. And so the book really took on a life of its own. And once it was done, I realized, man, there's only like 4 characters in it. It's all present day. There's no exploding helicopters or robots or anything. I've got a camera, I've got lights, I've got a microphone. And so I went to my buddy Noah and said, I think we can make a movie out of this. And 30 days later, we were making a feature film. So we filmed it in the fall of 2020. And now we've been in post-production for 5 years, juggling freelance and trying to do post-production in the evenings and weekends and that sort of thing. But we're coming close to the end. And so it's really exciting to see it all finally coming together.
Wow. Well, Paul, thank you for that, literal start to finish with this whole process here. I was taking notes as you went along because, like, so many things you would say, I was like, wait, like, that's so fascinating. So I had to keep myself a little list here. But I really do appreciate that rundown because now all of our listeners and myself know about this whole journey. I don't even, first off, know where to begin. The fact that you were sneaking off to a Waffle House in the middle of the night in the beginning of all of this to here you are now finally about to release the film. I mean, I have so many questions. I guess I would love to start off with more of the content of the book kind of stuff first, and then we'll dive into like that whole process with, running it past your friends and all of, the nitty-gritty type things. So, first off with the content of the book, obviously it kind of came to you and I guess, you weren't even expecting what it was going to be about from what I'm gathering here. But, the way you're phrasing some of these metaphors and messages within the book, I mean, if you don't mind, I would love to kind of just quote one of my favorite little lines here that I pulled out as I read here. Like a crashing wave into a craggy pit, the darkness rolled over her, stronger, colder, and heavier, filling her emptiness like acid, making like nothing inside her bigger and worse than before, scraping out the chasm inside her wider and deeper. I mean, I just love the images and the language between that, just something of darkness that physically rolls over when you have a very vivid way of describing depression. So I'm wondering, like, how did you choose this kind of language? How did you develop this central image? What does it represent to you in particular? Or was it mainly based on your discussions with your friends as you went around the process?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can really write well anything that you don't have some personal experience with, right? So I'm not going to say that I would not classify myself as someone who has been officially like suicidal. But there's been times that I've woken up staring at the ceiling thinking, if today is like the last 100 days, I don't think I want to do it again. Something's got to change. It's not so much that I wanted to give up. I just didn't want to keep living the life I was living. I just like something's got to go. Something's got to change. And the description there that you read, that's just kind of what it felt like to me. It just felt like this oppressive burden. It's ever present because it's sort of rooted in things in your life that you think are not where they're supposed to be, or they're are unfinished, or that are unfulfilling. And so until those things get finished or are fulfilling or are where you want them to be, you're going to kind of feel that anxiety. Or unless you can figure out a way to be content with where things are, right? So, because it's ever present, that word roll, that's the way it felt. It's just like it's just always there. And it's like the water in the river. You stand there and you watch all this water go by, thousands of gallons a second going by, and you ask, well, when's it going to stop? And it doesn't. That river's been going longer than human beings have been walking those mountains. And it's going to keep going long after we're gone, probably. Just like the river, if you lay down in the river, it's going to wash over you and you're going to drown. You can't stop. You have to get up and fight against it, and you have to walk upstream. You have to keep moving. You can't stop moving.
Yeah, and that's
Uh,
one of the core messages of the book too, right? I feel like that's something that Rory, one of your characters, says, kind of early on, give or take, and it also plays out differently, I would say, for the various characters. Would you agree? That
the idea,
metaphor of keep moving.
absolutely, yeah. It begins as a very literal thing. A lot of the things that Roy says in the beginning are very literal. And as you sort of go through their conversation and their relationship develops and Roy begins to reveal things about himself and his own life and things that have happened to him, you see that maybe some of the things even very early on that he says were not as literal as Gwen thought they were, or as that we thought they were when we read them. And we see that maybe Roy's not quite oblivious to types of things that Gwen might be going through. And they have some very frank conversations about that, that's part of what challenges, sort of this decision that she's made. And so in the beginning, it's very much a, logistical, geographical thing, but Gwen starts to understand it as she does it. And this is the thing I think that is difficult for those of us that end up in a dark place is there's a lot of good things that come to us, like a lot of good advice that may come to us that is hard to receive because we really won't understand it until we do it. We
Mm.
think I'll do it when I understand it. And unfortunately, it's like, well, you'll understand it when you do it. And
I
so
like that line. That's a good
as
quote.
Gwen does it, As she keeps moving through the water and all the obstacles that they face just fishing, that helps her understand like, hey, stuff's going to come, the water's going to keep coming and the dark times are going to keep coming, but I've just got to keep I got to keep moving upstream.
Yeah, first off, I think it's wonderfully crafted that, you're taking these very literal aspects and literal quotes, but they have that deeper meaning, but it's done in a way that you don't quite get it, until it happens and you have to kind of analyze it going about. And I think, for any, writer listening right now, that's an excellent strategy to take. You're not just trying to throw the message out to the reader to have them come to it on their own terms in the context of the book, which is done really well in your books.
Oh, thank you. Well, I used the word parable before, fable, allegory, parable, choose the word that you want to use. I like the word parable because of the construction of it. It's not an English word. It comes directly from the Greek. And the para prefix means aside, alongside, to the side, beside, kind of that idea. And then the balo ending, the root, means to throw, like a ball or a ballistic thing. So a parable is something that is thrown to the side. It is a story that's thrown to the side of a truth. So I don't give you the truth because if I try to give you the truth, you go, "Oh, wait a minute, what is this thing? I don't know what this is." Well, you're telling me what to do. I don't know if this will work for me, right? You get very defensive about it. That's this default human nature, and probably rightfully so, right? But if I tell you a story and you go with me on the story, and at the end of the story, you go, aha, I've had this idea by listening to this story. Now, maybe that's the exact idea I've been trying to get you to have by giving you the story, but it's still your idea. And you take it and you walk away with it, and it totally belongs to you. And just like wine takes on the flavor of the other things that were grown in the soil, so if you've grown vanilla or cinnamon or something in the soil, then the wine will have flavors of that. So it's not just the sunlight and the water and the species of grape, but it's actually the things that were in the soil. You have different things in your soil, in your background, and your experience than I do. And the story that I'm giving you really is just a seed. It's going to grow and look and taste differently for you than it did for me. And so my job as an author is how can I package this idea into a seed, into a fruit, even a fruit that you want to eat, seed and all, and then carry that idea on to somebody else. And it's going to look differently for you than it is for me. And so that's the way the parable works is if I can come to the side and give you some fiction, I have a better chance of you arriving and accepting this truth than if I just gave it to you outright.
Yeah, I love that metaphor too. The idea of like whatever you're growing around you is going to influence your perceptions of it. So just a very important thing for, again, anybody listening to embody on their own work, right? Whatever word you put on a page might be interpreted differently depending on whatever experiences somebody else has gone through. So all that being said, Paul, I would love to kind of, you know, segue into the writing process, right? So you spoke a lot about how, this kind of came to in the middle of the night, that Waffle House idea that you mentioned before. I'm wondering, what was the typical process like for you? What were some of your biggest challenges in writing this, if any, of course? And, ultimately, I guess, what was it like in the day-to-day processes?
Yeah, this story in particular was probably different than a lot of the other things that I write because it did feel like it was coming from somewhere else. It just felt like it was kind of writing itself. I don't remember a lot of the actual writing of the first draft. I don't remember what the idea was before it became what it is now. But typically what I've done in the past is things sort of ruminate in the mind until they have to get out. And I've used the metaphor before of like an industrial sink, and it's full of all kinds of stuff, and it's just kind of swimming around there. And then at some point, I'm ready, and I pull the plug, and everything comes out, and I get it on the page. That's how I'm able to go to Waffle House at 3 in the morning and bang out 3,500 words in
Oh,
one
wow.
sentence. It's not because I'm a fastidious writer. It just is because it's pent up, and at some point, it has to come out. Again, Kindling, my first story, I wrote the whole thing in like 2 weeks, but I've been thinking about the story for 10 years, right? So how long did it take me to write it? Did it take me 2 weeks or did it take me 10 years and 2 weeks?
Mm. Yeah, that
But
makes a lot of sense. A lot of people sit on their ideas and they think about it, and then the next thing you know, it's been however many months, and what have you gotten on the page, right? So I guess another aspect of that is just like start writing as soon as you're inspired, no matter what time of day it is.
absolutely. Some people are better at recrafting something that they've written. So
Mhm.
a lot of people give the practical advice of your first draft is not writing. Your first draft is sort of plopping the clay down on the wheel. After that, you're going to mold it and you're actually going to shape it into something, but you can't edit what you haven't written yet. So the first draft is just sort of getting it all out. And I do that to some degree, but like kindling, I wrote it. We did some editing. I changed a couple of things. It's not largely different from the draft that I wrote. The darkness rolled over her. There are a couple places where I made some kind of major changes, but overall, like what you're reading is I didn't recraft a lot of those stuff there. I didn't think about it a lot before I wrote it down, but by the time I sit down to write, I kind of have a sense of what I want to do and the flavor of it and that sort of thing. I write in Scrivener, which is a software program, word processor. I like Scrivener because it is, with Microsoft Word, you've got like one long document and you're just sort of working in this linear document. Scrivener is like a binder format. And so I can have basically every chapter or every little idea, every little scene is its own document. So when I'm working on that scene, I'm just alone in that idea. And I can also rearrange things very quickly. And I don't feel the need to have to work in a linear order. If I get an idea down here and, towards the end of the book, I can very quickly find where I can go back and I don't even have to write it. I just go back and make a note in the side panel there about, okay, I need to add this into this scene to kind of set up what I'm going to do down here. And so once I started using Scrivener, that completely changed my ability to write, especially screenplays, to be able to see the whole screenplay in sort of a color-coded outline format while I'm working on this one page over here. So that's helped me a lot. I have Scrivener both for my Mac and also my iPad. So that's what I did when I went to Waffle House. I grabbed my iPad, sit there. Pretty much all my books I wrote at the local donut shop. We get this 24-hour donut shop and I could sit at the counter. They got Wi-Fi. I'm not taking up some waitress's table or whatever, so I could sit there at the counter and I would sit there till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and just have donut and decaf and write books.
Hey, that's one way to do it, right? First off, thank you for the tip for Scribbler. I'm not
Scrivener,
familiar with that one. That's a really good, platform, it sounds like. I'm using Google Docs and Microsoft Word still.
that works just as well too. People have all their own mechanisms. In fact, so my short stories have gone from idea all the way to publishing within Scrivener. So in Scrivener, I've written them all completely, I think, pretty much on the iPad. Then I have to bring it to the desktop to do the more complex formatting things. But if you are looking at, the paperback book, the guts of the paperback book, this is the PDF that I exported from Scrivener and sent directly to Amazon. Amazon
Wow.
didn't do this. I made this PDF. I decided what font was going to be used, where the page number was going to go, all that stuff. I sent the camera ready PDF straight out of Scrivener. If you got the ebook, you're reading the file that I made with Scrivener. It wasn't sent off to somebody or some hybrid publisher or whatever. It's like that's the file that I made on this laptop that you're reading, or copy of it, digital copy of it.
Understood. Well, I love it. And, not to promote, one program over the other, but it's always good for authors, especially listening to this podcast today, to have a good array of choices to pick between when they're writing and crafting their books. That being said, Paul, there's a question that I've been wondering, because when I was reading this short story, it's written in all lowercase. At least the version that I received, but that has to have been intentional. And why? It's basically all lowercase letters, if I'm not mistaken. When I was reading through it. Was that an intentional choice?
Absolutely. And there's a lot of little reasons. None of them are very good. But the overall reason is because I wanted to, because that's what I wanted to do. That's the big reason. Why did I want to? First of all, for me, it's kind of an aesthetic thing,
Mm.
So the very first chapter begins, the chapter title says Friday night. So as soon as you got a capital F and a capital N, I just feel like all the words are lopsided and just aesthetically, I don't like that. So I don't like capital letters for the most part. So I'll use them for proper names and things that I want to highlight or something like that. A lot of my friends, they would text me or send me a message on Facebook or something, and they'd be like, "Hey, I just got your book. I'm excited to read it." I'm like, "Okay." And then about 5 minutes later, I'd get a text like, "Why did you do this to me? I can't read this. This is wrong."
Oh,
But then usually they would come back after they were done with it and say, I got used to it pretty quick. And actually, I ended up really liking it because it just felt like it flowed. One of the sort of arbitrary things that we do with capital letters is we capitalize the first letter, of every sentence. And we do that to show that idea is done and here begins a new idea. But when you don't do that, they do just kind of flow together. And this story in particular is such a train of thought of what Gwen is going through that I think it works really well. Likewise, in Kindling, is another story where you're very close to the central character and sort of what he's going through and what he's thinking and what he's feeling. And as he's sort of hunted by this deadly beast, all the emotions and terror and everything that come out, and it's coming out so quickly. Parts where I stop even using punctuation because it's like, oh, this is getting in the way. We just got to get to the ideas, you know? So a lot of it is just, it's just a personal choice. Some of it I was encouraged to do when one of my favorite movies of all time, but especially recently, is No Country for Old Men.
Okay.
Such a, such a good movie. And I like Coen Brothers okay, but I don't typically like love their stuff the way some of my friends do. But I love that film. And there's just nothing wrong with it. It's just totally perfect. I love it. So I'm in the bookstore and I see the book that it's based on by Cormac McCarthy, who I was not really familiar with at the time. Cormac McCarthy also wrote The Road.
I love The Road. That's one of my favorites too.
Book.
So it's
I
not to
haven't found the
interrupt.
movie, but the book is fantastic. So I pick up No Country for Old Men and I crack it open, and it just happens to be the scene where he's flipping the coin with the guy in the gas station, the friendo scene, you know. And I'm reading it, I'm looking at the dialogue, and it is like letter for letter, straight off the page of the book. And I'm like, oh, that's why the dialogue was so good in this movie, is because it's from this novelist who understands people and understands this culture, you know. And one thing that Cormac McCarthy does is he doesn't put quotes around his dialogue. It's just in there like the rest of the prose. And what you find very quickly is, oh yeah, I don't need all that. Just from starting a new line and what is being said, I can tell who's talking. I can tell that it's dialogue, that it's not, you know, the action or the prose or whatever that's going on. And so just seeing that made me feel like I can do what I want. This is my book. I'll do what I want with it. I know the rules of grammar. I know what to do with punctuation. Like I made good grades in school. I know what to do. So if you see a comma out of place, if you see a semicolon that shouldn't be there, if you see an em dash not used the way it's supposed to be used, that's because I wanted to use it that way. I wanted to use the reader to kind of pause there for a second or to stop and see that a new thing was happening. The whole thing here, what is language? What is punctuation? What is this stuff for? It is so that we can sort of communicate ideas in a common way. And so if I can bend that a little bit to communicate a new idea, then I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. Well, first off, segueing back into like the lowercase letters of your book, I think it makes sense also just because of like the tone and nature of our protagonist, right? Like she's considering all these dark thoughts. So lowercase, in my own perception, is kind of like more subdued, more like, behind the scenes kinds of letters as opposed to like the big uppercase letters. So I just think it works well in that way too. It kind of characterizes her a little more.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Just another element to it. Would have been funny if like, certain parts were using uppercase to show like more confidence in some scenes or something. Just a little side note there. But I know going back into, it does make a lot of sense. Why do we focus so much on punctuation, conventions, that sort of thing where, very prestigious authors like Cormac McCarthy just don't even like bother with that. As a proofreader myself, I meticulously am analyzing these documents page by page. Is this comma in the right place? Is this the right quotation mark? Em dashes? But I see what you mean entirely. You get the message across either way, and it's intentional. Yeah, no, some really good stuff there. But I think this is a great time to transition into your really innovative concept, 5 coffees and a book. Would you mind sharing a little bit about this discussion framework with our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I get the book out there, and my friends and family are buying it up and supporting me, which is really great. And I go home to visit, and an acquaintance of mine has read the book. Our mothers were very close friends. And so I've known this person my whole life, but we're not real close friends. I just know who she is. And so she stops me in the hallway and says, oh, I got your book. I loved it. And she begins talking about the book. And very quickly she's talking about why she liked it. And it's because these are things that I felt, in my life and things that I've gone through. And I find that she's now talking about herself, and she's telling me things that acquaintances don't really share with each other. Sometimes even close friends don't necessarily even share with each other. But I could see she felt safe doing that because since I had written this book, she knew that I knew what she was going through. She knew I knew about this, and she felt free to share that. And I felt free then to reciprocate because I wanted her to know that she wasn't alone. And it also felt good for me to say, yeah, I go through this stuff too. And we had this really great conversation. And when either of us maybe didn't want to get into personal details or maybe got a little scared of what we were talking about, we could just talk about the book. We could just sort of default to the book. Oh, it's like in the book when this happens, you know. So after that conversation, I was like, that was really something amazing. How can I have everyone who reads this book have that same experience? Because honestly, I would rather them have that experience than read the book. That's the whole point of writing the book, right? So over that summer, then in 2019, I developed 5 coffees in a book with a friend of mine. She did all the artwork and kind of helped me craft some of the language and the graphic design and stuff. And it's a 5-week mini book club. And it's centered around The Darkness Rolled Over Her. And so the idea of the 5 weeks is this. Well, so just very quickly, let me give a quick summary of the book. So Gwen has decided to take her own life. She's got this one last trip planned, and so she thinks this will be a good way to say goodbye to some people I know. So it's a fly fishing retreat. She goes on the retreat. She's paired up with this old fly fisherman named Roy. Roy's this charming old mountain dude, and she gets this chummy relationship with him throughout the day. That starts to kind of challenge her thinking a little bit. Also on this trip, there's a younger woman named Sam, and she looks at Sam and she thinks, here's somebody who, you know, she's where I was at that age. I don't want her to be where I am at my age. I don't wish this on anybody, you know. But what can I do? I got nothing left. How can I help her? And so this sort of 3-way pull between the decisions she's made and what she sees Roy trying to do for her and what she would like to do for Sam if she could, this is what's sort of pulling her through the story. This is what keeps sort of pulling her upriver in the story. So in 5 coffees in a book, you'll get together with some friends over coffee, like 2 to 5 people. I think any more than that, it gets a little crowded. So 2 to 5 people, small group where you can be sort of just intimate and transparent with each other. And week 1, whoever's getting the group together says, here's where you get the book. Week 2, everyone's read the book by now. So in week 2, you're talking about the story, some of the themes of the story. There's a discussion guide that walks you through it. You don't have to know how to lead a group. You don't have to know how to teach, anything like that. It's all there for you. If one person in the group can read English, you're good to go. So you can have a group of illiterate people. You can do this in prisons. You can do this with, you know, homeless people, whatever. As long as one person can read English, you can do this. So weeks 3, 4, and 5, then you talk about some of the characters in the book. So week 3, you're talking about Roy, and you're talking about encouragement. And you talk about people that have encouraged you in your life. Week 4, you talk about Gwen and the shape of her story and the changes that she goes through and the decisions that she makes in the story. And it gives the people in the group an opportunity. They're not obligated, but it gives them the opportunity to share part of their story if they would like to do that, and gives them some guide on how to do that in a safe way. And then week 5, you talk about Sam and you talk about people that you would like to encourage. And so you're left at the end of the 5 weeks with sort of an exhortation to take 5 coffees in a book to one of those Sams and redo the 5 weeks with them. And so the idea would be that hopefully these groups would sort of multiply and replicate, and this seed would bear fruit, and it would just kind of continue, you know, going out in that way. So that's 5 coffees in a book. It's an easy way to talk about hard things. You'll make friends for life, not just friends that you will have for the rest of your life, but friends that will bring life, that will put life into you just by being there and supporting you. One of the first groups that sort of guinea pigged this for me was a group of people that had known each other for a very long time. They knew each other very well. They were close. And they probably might even say, I can't imagine how we could be better friends, some of them, you know. But they did this. They started a group chat. By like week 2 or 3, they were saying, can we keep this going after the 5 weeks? Because I didn't realize how badly I needed these kind of relationships, you know, in my life. And week 4, instead of going to the coffee shop as usual, they went to one of their houses and they were there for 3 hours because they got into sharing their story. Because they had been friends for a long time, they were able to be really open with each other and share things that they've not shared with many, if anybody, you know. And it was just a very important bonding thing for them. It unlocked a level of friendship for them that I don't even think that they knew that they could have with each other. So by week 5, they were excited to go out and have that experience with someone else. And so that's the experience that I want everyone to have with the book. I've tried to make it as easy as possible. If you go to 5coffeesinabook.com, you can get the ebook of The Darkness Rolled Over Her for free. You can get the discussion guide. The 5 Coffees in a Book discussion guide is there for free. The 5 Coffees in a Book discussion guide is also on our Instagram and our Facebook if you want to flip through the pictures that way. But I think it's a really great way to read the book and talk about it with a friend. Because the number one thing about all this darkness, the number one thing that keeps people plunged in this darkness is isolation. That's the number one thing. And so when you can sit down and talk about it with somebody else, when I've discussed hard things with somebody else, invariably that person on the other side says, yeah, me too. And it always surprises me every time. But as soon as they say it, I know that I'm okay. I know that things are going to be okay. Not that all the problems are solved, not that I'm going to ignore any bad things that have happened or whatever. But if there's somebody out there that understands what I'm going through, I know I can get through it. I know I can keep moving.
Well, first off, I think, community is a huge thing, especially in the writing world. And if you're dealing with, topics that this book is about, for example, you need support by you. So this is just incredible that you've been able to build something like this, not only to better yourself mentally, but also your, writing abilities, your enjoyment of the book in general. So, yeah, amazing stuff. I'm going to put the links to that in the description box of this podcast so that if you're listening today, check it out. Wait for the podcast to be over, but then click on over onto those links and go ahead and, take a look because, that's just the first step to not only enjoying The Darkness Rolled Over Her, but also maybe meeting some new friends. It's really cool stuff. As we start to wrap up today, wondering, first off, if you want to speak a little bit about the upcoming movie for us to, know what to be on the lookout for. And also if you have any last tips for aspiring writers out there, somebody who might want to follow in your footsteps. Two-part question
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah, great. So if you go to fivecoffeesinabook.com and you go to get the free ebook, you put in your email address to get the ebook. Now you can unsubscribe from that email list right away if you want. But if you don't, if you stay on the email list, you will receive emails when the film has got a premiere date or is going to be available for sale or whatever, then you'll be on the list to get that. You'll be notified about that. If you stay on that email list, I don't send emails out on that. You'll get a few automated emails right at the beginning to give you the download link to the book and to remind you to share it with somebody, that kind of thing. After that, I literally have not sent out an email on that email list in like 3 years. It's literally there just so people can get the book. You're not going to get spammed with stuff. I'm not going to sell your email address to somebody else. So by downloading the free ebook, you're also going to be on that notification list about the film. The film does not have a hard release date yet. We don't have a very specific plan in place. We're mostly focused on getting the visual effects done, wrapping up the music, wrapping up the sound design. The visual effects are the big things that's sort of hanging around. There's not a ton of big visual effects in the film, but there are a couple of big important shots that we're working on trying to get done. So that's the way to stay in touch of what's going on with the film. If you want to see the trailer for the film, the film is there. You can go to thedarknessrolledoverher.movie. And I've got the YouTube version of the trailer. You can just search The Darkness Rolled Over Her on YouTube and you can find it there as well. It's on my Instagram and other places. It's out there. You can find it. As far as, tips for other writers, I'll tell you what, I'll give you one technical thing and one sort of philosophical thing. Okay. The technical thing is the idea of free writing. I took a creative writing class when I told you I did music ed before I went to film school. And I almost flunked out of college because I was just so unhappy with just sort of the typical college thing. And so my last semester there, I was basically just taking whatever classes I wanted to like stay on my parents' insurance and be a full-time student. I was just sort of goofing around. The screenwriting class I wanted to take filled up. So I took a creative writing class. One night our teacher gets sick or something and some TA comes in, teaches us free writing, changed my life forever. I don't even remember the guy's name. Okay. But the idea of free writing is you set a clock for 25 minutes, you write for 25 minutes solid, and you don't stop. You don't edit, you don't go back and correct spelling, nothing. You just start writing and you do not stop. And so the way I have used that is I will have a problem with my story, or I will be thinking about how am I going to market this book or this movie or whatever. And I'll sit down with whatever my question of the free writing session is. I'll set my timer and I'll start writing. And what I have found is the first 15, 20 minutes or so, I'm just sort of brain dumping all the thoughts and ideas and stuff that I've had in my mind. I'm now putting on paper. Many of them are now fixed in a tangible medium for the first time ever. They've only been here. And so now I'm sort of seeing them as a complete sentence or whatever for the first time. So that's the new thing, but it's not new information. It's all stuff that's been in my mind before. But then it's that last 5 or 10 minutes. That's when the new stuff starts to happen. And it's kind of like if you do push-ups, let's say you can do 50 push-ups, okay? It's really only those last 2 that really do anything for you, where you're like really struggling, but you got to do the first 48 to get to those last 2. You can't just do 2 push-ups, right? You got to do all that work beforehand. And so that's the beauty of free writing, is it sort of cleans the snow drifts off the highway so that new stuff can get through. And so in that last 5 or 10 minutes, you get this new stuff and you either get an answer to your question or you get a better question, or you figure out what you need to answer before you can get to that question, whatever. And then you can stop at 25 minutes, refill your coffee, bathroom break, touch grass, whatever, come back and do another session if you need to. This is the way I think about everything now. I do it with my writing. I do it with my personal life. I basically think through everything in a free writing context because it's just so powerful. So that's the technical thing. The philosophical thing is this: embrace failure and ignorance. I grew up, in school, failure is bad. Don't make bad grades. Don't fail. Don't miss answers. If you're working on a project, succeed. Success is a big thing. And I had to learn to embrace failure and ignorance as ways of learning. That's the only way you're going to get to the good stuff. And there's this quote. I've got this poster hanging out here. We had this poster hanging up in my house growing up. It's Will Rogers, old American humorist. And it says, everybody is ignorant only on different subjects. And I never really understood that as a kid. But as an adult, I realized that number one, somebody that I think is stupid may be stupid about something that I know about, but they probably know something that I don't. So it's kind of a humility kind of thing. But when I've started writing books, I considered myself a filmmaker. I didn't know about writing books. And I got into this author group on Facebook with some friends, and they were giving me a lot of good advice about the publishing world and how to market books and different conventions and things that were going on, stuff that I didn't know about, little technical things to know. And I told them from the very beginning, I said, hey, I'm ignorant here. Everybody's ignorant on different subjects. I know story. I know how to tell a story, but I don't know about the actual mechanical process of a book or publishing a book. I'm ignorant on that. So you just have to be patient with me when I say, I'm sorry, can you repeat that phrase or can you repeat that term? Tell me what that means. And they loved it. They were very happy to do it. The parallel thing that I say with this, there was a comedian, John Mendoza, who said, he said, I'm kind of stupid. And life is actually a lot easier when you're stupid because you do something stupid and people go, what are you, stupid? And he says, well, yeah. And then, what can they say to that? So I have just found sort of embracing ignorance and embracing failure as sort of a superpower because, again, I considered myself a filmmaker and ignorant at writing books. And then suddenly I had 4 books and still had no film. So I was like, so what am I? Am I an editor or am I an author? And so when it was time to make the film, I tried really hard to say, hey, I gotta throw away my pride here and approach this with the same ignorance that I approach my books if I'm going to get this done. And now here we are, almost ready to release a feature film finally.
Well, again, thank you for all of these tips. Once again, I'm sitting here thinking wow, that's something really cool. And we go into the next part there. But, for everybody listening today, these are amazing tips to hone in on. Oh my goodness, there's so many different things here. I had a whole list here. Basically, all of these tips are ones that we should, be using in our own practices every day, especially the idea of, you have to keep having those failures until you get to the right point. I was trying to figure out the exact words you were using there, but the way you phrased it was completely insightful. The workout, that was exactly what it was, you only feel it when you get to those last 2 push-ups, you have to keep working at it. So, thank you for all that. And to everybody listening today, definitely implement it in your own writing processes, even in any area of your life as well, like you mentioned yourself, Paul. So yes, thank you for all this. And to everybody listening today, again, you can download your free digital copy of The Darkness Rolled Over Her and also explore the 5 copies and a book discussion guide at 5copiesandabook.com. I'm also going to have the links to everything here in the description, so nice and easy to find. And with that brings us to the end of our conversation with Paul Andrew Skidmore on the Authors on Mission podcast. Paul, thank you for sharing your journey as an author and filmmaker and for discussing these powerful themes and all of your projects here. To listeners, again, download these copies. And remember, at Authors on Mission, we don't really discuss authors. We immerse themselves in their world to bring you the insights that can transform your own creative journeys. So join us next time as we continue to explore the strategies of successful authors who are making an impact in their fields. This is Danielle Hutchinson from Authors on Mission. And until next time, keep writing, keep leading, and keep inspiring. We'll see you next time. This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.